Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Printiverse. Thanks, everybody, for joining us again. If you're here, that we have some coffee and tea left, some snacks, feel free to partake as we start our panel. Breach is the new black. Privacy, data privacy in the cloud. Very topical issue these days in the print industry, since we do so much personalization, and it does touch upon data. So let's start off with who you are and what you do before we get into products and services. So go ahead, Arifik.
Okay, I'm Stefan Karlsson, and I'm the CTO of Arifik Development. Arifik is a cloud-based system for print estimating, automatic imposition, and as a background, I have been born and raised in a family printing business and studied computer science at university. And relevant for this panel, I also have been working 10 years for the Swedish government with information security. So that's me.
And you are from Sweden, correct?
Yeah.
Skål! Stephen?
To continue the international participation in the panel, I'm Steve McWilliam. I'm from Canada, one of the owners of Avanti. We're in the print MIS space. So we're all about job costing, job tracking, and billing. And the fellows, the other members of the panel are all partners of mine, and we have spent a lot of time making sure that the data that we do pass between our applications and our equipment is very secure. We have got a lot of customers in the financial industry and in the government business. About 40% of our business is in implants, so this is a very important topic to them.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Amorosano. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of Marketing for Canon's Business Imaging Solutions Group. I also run the professional services organization in a company we call Canon Information and Imaging Solutions. Certainly the topic of security is one that's on everybody's mind, and looking forward to a lively discussion this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Pitney Bowes in the house.
Good afternoon. I'm Linda Kish. I'm a Director of Global Product Management for Pitney Bowes in our SMB segment. I'm responsible for the products that are tabletop products for folding and inserting mail pieces. And one of our key drives has been to bring world-class mail piece integrity to the SMB segment. So offerings that were previously only available to large enterprise clients, because the integrity is important for clients in every segment.
Thank you very much. Paul?
Deborah, I thought this orange was the new black, so I wore this shirt today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Anyway, my name is Paul Abdul. I'm with Solimar Systems. I'm the Vice President of Enterprise Solutions. And at Solimar, security is critical to our clients. We focus on the transaction space, where we help organizations to re-engineer documents, store them, and distribute them, either physically or electronically.
And last but not least,
This is Eric Thibodeau. I'm a business manager with Xerox. In the cloud space, we've launched a lot of different products, and looking at all the security of all the passing of the data between our partner products, as well as integrity within the various systems. We spend a lot of time looking at this and making sure that it's very, very secure for all of our customers.
okay, I'm actually going to start with you, if you don't mind, and if you could talk a little louder into the microphone, that would be awesome. The first question is, how do your products actually enable customers to use, manage, and store data?
Well, it depends on the products. We have some that are server-based products where they're installed on site. We also have products that are up in the cloud. They take advantage of utilizing repositories up in the cloud, very large repositories, which can be had at a very, very inexpensive price. And it just depends on exactly what we're trying to accomplish, either from a web-to-print space, storefronts, or as a pre-press automation systems, as well as electronic publications that are all up in the cloud. And we utilize all of these different ones using the existing technology that's up in the standard-based systems and that, which really makes it a lot easier that you don't have to become an expert on how to do all of these because of the fact that there's standards in place.
Thank you very much. Paul?
So this is it was an interesting question. How do our products help you store it? We have a product that will help you store it. Actually, a tool to house your products after they've been re-engineered, created, and distributed to your clients. We can also send that same information to your own content management system so that you can store it yourself, or like you said a moment ago, we'll help you get it to the cloud if that's where you want it as well.
Thank you. Linda?
So our products being physical products for the protection of data, take an electronic file and give the clients the same security that they would have for their electronic data. So clients spend a great deal of time protecting their electronic data. And so for physical mail piece, we offer solutions that compare what's printed on the physical document to an electronic file and provide reconciliation for the client that all mail pieces expected were processed, or any other disposition of what happened to that mail piece in the run. So they get end-to-end disposition of their data. So it's in a very easy-to-use format with an exception file that allows them to then reprint anything that was missing. So they get full end-to-end integrity for their run.
Sir?
So, of course, Canon is a provider of a wide array of technical solutions in the production print marketplace. We offer a wide-ranging set of solutions to help provide for the use, management, and storage of data. And most of these technologies are wrapped in and around the Prisma software suite that we make available to customers. So, and these software technologies provide key capabilities for web store management and creation, as well as full shop management, as well as either storage in the cloud, as well as on-premise, for the purpose of supporting customer requirements. So regardless of the types of requirements customers have around production workflow, Canon is providing a set of software technologies to support clients in satisfying those needs.
Thank you very much. Stephen?
So at Avanti, we take on a different perspective than some of the other folks here, in that we separate workflow inside the print shop between production workflow. How do we create? How do we prepare? How do we print? Separate that from the administrative workflow or the business workflow. So what's really important to my customers is making sure that only people should have access to the system itself inside the implant or inside the commercial shop, and be able to look at their customer in the eye and say it's being handled in a very secure way. So often we'll take advantage of someone else's authentication. So the large financial organization, we're using their LDAP, their authentication, and then we have what we refer to as role-based security inside the Avanti application to make sure that folks only have access to the parts of the system that they really should have access. If they're down in the shipping department, there's absolutely no reason for them to see customer data or who's ordering print or what type of business is going on, and all of that. So that's the lines in the road for us in keeping that separate. So for us, it's all about the administrative workflow.
Stefan?
Yeah, we are also a software provider, and we only uses cloud-based storage. We have no support for local service. We believe that data is more complete, most effectively and securely stored in the cloud. And we also believe, like Avanti, in role-based security. We also have different levels of roles with different rights that you set up when you install our system.
Thank you very much. Okay, this question is actually from one of our print chatters, Richard Dannenberg, and he would like to know, what are best practices for small printing companies to actually secure their customer data? Would you like to start, Stefan?
Yeah. The best tip I have is not to try to do your own security. Homegrown security is not what we recommend. Leave the security to IT professionals, and that's when cloud-based systems is the way to go. Especially for small or medium-sized companies who can't afford to have a large department of IT professionals.
I would agree with Stefan as well. I think it's important for the small print shop to know that they can run it on premise. They can run it. They can run a system like that on the cloud. So again, back to that distinction between the administrative workflow and the production workflow. Inside of Avanti, we don't actually store the customer's files. We store the location of those files. So we leave it. We count on, again, other partners that we have on the panel with us today to make sure that it's very much a part of their strategy to make sure that the data is secure, and then we take ownership for making sure that only people, there's a UNC path to that file, that only those that should be able to get to it do that. And then we separate in the layers between the application and the data. And then, again, for those that are accessing the system via the web, if they're submitting jobs, they're in between that DMZ zone and can't even get to the stuff behind it.
Yeah, I think there's no question that virtually everyone on the panel will likely agree that subject matter expertise around data security is critical, and every small print service provider certainly has to make an assessment as to whether or not they have the subject matter expertise in their own organizations to do these types of things, whether it be securing customer data through on-premise tools or securing data in the cloud. I mean, there are certainly advantages to doing both. But I think it starts with an internal assessment as to what your skill set is, and depending upon that skill set, maybe the decision to use expertise from the outside. I mean, this is certainly where many of the providers on the panel today can provide support to print service providers in the marketplace and make the task of securing customer information in particular a lot more simpler than it otherwise has to be.
I'd like just to follow up with a question before we go further on. You mentioned something about assessing. I think that's a very interesting point. Do you help printers assess what sort of security that they need and what is possible and what are the options out there?
Sure. Assessment is critical. I mean, this is true in terms of business workflow in general, but maybe even more critically important in terms of ways in which we can secure information, particularly for printers who are migrating into becoming customer communication management providers. They're dealing with a much more complex ecosystem in terms of the services they provide. So certainly Canon as an organization, through our professional services delivery capabilities, one of the specific areas that we focus on is helping customers to assess the issues they have to overcome in both managing customer information as well as doing so in a secure manner. So that's a critical first step, I think, particularly as a print service provider engages in activities that are dealing with customer information to a greater extent than they may have historically done so in the past.
Thank you very much. Linda?
Sure. So just to refresh, we were talking about a small printing company. So from the solutions that we were talking about before...
I'm sorry, can you move the mic close? Thanks.
Sure. So we were talking about a small printing company, right, and I have to agree with the previous three respondents. So we're talking about at Pitney Bowes solutions to help that small printing company ensure the accuracy of the physical printed data and the integrity of the printed information, that it gets out the door correctly without any breach of integrity. Certainly there are lots of solutions regarding data, and again, as the others have said, that are much more robust, that a client would assess. And you can always follow and find more information on Pitney Bowes via social media for that.
Can I go now?
Please.
Away.
Por favor.
So, one of the things, I'm going to stir up a little controversy here. I don't know about cloud being better than on-premise. I think we're starting to see a migration to that, but as I go through financial organizations, insurance companies with in-plant operations, that more and more they are not letting cloud or their data go to the cloud or their customers or members' information. So they want it on premise. They're building some DMZ zones that are ridiculous and firewalls. They're separating application and data. So I think it depends on the business. I think there's a lot of things you can put in the cloud, but I don't think it's necessarily the safest or the best. It's really philosophical at an organization.
I'm sorry, Paul, to your point, more people are afraid of the cloud than anything else.
Yeah, and I think there's some ignorance there as well. I think it's a lack of education on how it is good. But regardless of that, we had a question earlier, is the customer always right? At another panel, they may not know what they don't know yet about the cloud, or can they even get there? So one of the things you were talking about as well is the assessment piece as a follow-up question. One of the things that we do from a best practices standpoint is take a list, analyze your organization from a best practices perspective, from the time data enters the system to the time it's distributed, whether it's physically or electronic, looking for the gaps, and security is one of those gaps that we'd look for. So really understanding that. And then what we're also seeing, and keep in mind the majority of our printers were transaction printers, statements, invoices, those types of critical documents with a lot of personal information, healthcare, etc. And what we're seeing is now a transition to that marketing service provider because they're extending their services. So they've already been good at that. So for me, going the other way, I think if people were print service providers, as was mentioned earlier on the panel, going to the secure aspect, I think it's harder for them.
Thank you very much.
So a few months ago, I actually visited a small printer in Arizona that kind of fits this scenario, because they were trying to install some new software, get it up and running, make sure everything was set up. The problem with this particular one is they did have a outside IT consultant that was in Missouri, and they were in Arizona, and this happened because there used to be two companies that ended up splitting, but they ended up with their IT completely separate from where they were physically located. So the pre-press manager was trying to help them to get through the software install. So we talked a lot about having the right people there.
I'm sorry, did you say the pre-press manager was?
The pre-press manager was the guy that was on the phone talking to the IT guy.
Okay, that's what I thought you said.
Missouri. So the key here is, yes, you need to have the right people. Having them physically located there so they can actually touch the keyboard really helped a lot, and getting them so that they can do the assessments. So a small company, having your nephew doing the IT and the security, which I've run into also with some various ones, and they were just fresh out of college, may not be the right approach. But they had the right idea. They needed to have an IT professional. They needed to move forward this. But you got to make some reasonable decisions about who you bring in, who you have setting up this, so that they understand and they can set it up properly. They can do it in a secure manner.
Right.
Okay.
I actually have a question from a print chatter that I really don't understand what it means, so I hope you guys do, but if you don't, we'll skip it. It is from a company called Independent Folders, and they want to know HIPAA versus PCI versus others. What does it mean to be compliant, and why should I care? I have no idea what that means. Sir, Xerox, go ahead.
I think a lot of us probably know what that is, but the HIPAA are the standards around healthcare related security of information. PCI is a payment card interface or something like that, PCI. So it's all the credit card information. So the reason, that it's important is this information is really, really sensitive. And you really have to be careful about that. Anything with healthcare, if you're not working with hospitals, you're not working with doctor's office, insurance companies like medical insurance, you may not have to worry about HIPAA. But PCI, if you've got a web to print solution or you're anything dealing with credit cards, is absolutely critical that you're compliant with this. Now, the interesting point is for especially PCI. Many times you can use outside payment card gateways that are truly PCI compliant 100%, and that you're not actually taking the credit card information, and it's really flowing directly to these gateways and you're not actually the one that's keeping track of this information. That can help you an awful lot. Most of the solutions take that type of an approach. So you're going to authorize.net and you're going to all these other providers, PayPal, etc., to take care of that information. It is critical that your whole system is compatible with the standards, else you can run into the problems that Target is having, Home Depot, etc. I mean, they're having a lot of those issues because they were not secure enough and people got all this information.
Thank you very much. Cannon, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a subject that has been a very interesting topic, certainly inside Canon, but for many of our customers. HIPAA in particular, as many providers of print services are looking to provide those services to the healthcare market. And we actually, within our own organization, just recently went through a fairly significant and lengthy process to build a set of HIPAA-compliant delivery services to the marketplace. And I can tell you from that experience that one of the most important things that you need to do is you need to build repeatable and documented process methodologies associated with the delivery of the services in this area, lest you find yourself in a position where you can't clearly articulate exactly what you're doing from a security perspective as it relates to dealing with personal information and particularly personal health information. This isn't an area to tread lightly in, and particularly due to the fact that the fines associated with violations are huge, and the liability for printers, and not to mention others who provide these types of services, are highly significant. So again, another area where if you are a print provider and you're interested in providing services to the healthcare industry, certainly there's a market opportunity there. However, it's one that you really need to think about strongly before you decide to venture in, particularly in cases where you're going to be dealing with personal health information. So certainly, again, a nice market opportunity, but one that requires a deep set of documented processes in order for you as an organization to be compliant with the key regulations governing healthcare.
Linda, do you want to add something to that? I'm not sure if this applies to you, gentlemen.
On this one, I would love to add.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I'll move on to the other.
So HIPAA and the protection of confidential healthcare information, the fines that were just mentioned are per instance, right? So it's a very stiff fine per instance of sharing someone else's confidential healthcare information. So imagine if you were mailing explanations of benefits and Linda's mail piece or sheet of paper got mixed in with Olivia's mail piece. That's one instance. So making sure that the printed data has the integrity so that the sheets aren't mixed into the same envelope for multiple recipients. So many companies today rely on old technology like optical mark recognition on their statements or not having a file to compare. So doing things like printing a 2D barcode and comparing a license plate number within that 2D barcode to a file and having that disposition of each and every mail piece is critical. And it's not just the fines. Think about the person whose healthcare information was compromised and the potential lawsuits of that person against the parent company. So although much medical mailing is outsourced, so let's just pick XYZ Insurance Company uses Linda's Letter Shop. So Linda's Letter Shop gets the fine for mixing, but imagine the lawsuits against XYZ Insurance Company. And so HIPAA's just one. So we talked about PCI and financial information. Also think about Sarbanes-Oxley and financial information for companies. So it's not just about compliance, right? There's a bigger piece to the story for mailers, and that's about peace of mind and knowing that each and every mail piece that was supposed to go out was assembled and mailed correctly. So why does it matter? It matters to get it right, and mail piece integrity gives you that by having the best technology out there.
So I think the overall answer is everybody better care about this if you touch data at all. Paul, yes, we'll come to you 1 second. Paul, do you want to address this, and then we'll come to Stefan?
Yeah, I'd love to touch on this. This is bread and butter for us every day. We're in these operations, just like Linda, where you cannot make a mistake, period. It's a zero defect business. And now, first of all, the question, I think, actually used the term HIPAA compliant or something like that. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. I just want to say it a few times because so many times people say, "Oh, is your software HIPAA compliant?" No, it doesn't exist. It's a process. It's just like he was saying earlier around the standard operating procedures, the documenting them, getting it ready for the auditors. Yep. That's what makes you ready, compliant. But once you, and there's certifications around different things that people have made up, but the key is not making that mistake and putting in the procedures. And you know what? When you go to a court of law with your standard operating procedures, even if you've made a mistake, that's okay. It's a little bit more forgiving than if you don't have those in place and you've made a mistake. One of the things that I think is important as well is today, compliance trumps money. So one of the things that we're seeing is even if it costs more to put in those procedures, people are doing them to avoid those costs that Linda was talking about, because the costs are far exceeding the investment in the tools and the people to fix these things.
Thank you very much, Paul. Stefan, did you want to add something?
Yeah. Okay. I think that the big risk when you are dealing with sensitive or confidential data is how to get this data into the printer's systems. Because if you have an offline system, then the data has to be transferred in some way to the printer. And how is that done? By email. Email is not safe. If you have, if you want to, you can listen to emails. What you need is an encrypted transfer possibility, and that's integrated into good cloud-based systems. So then the data is secured from the endpoint to the endpoint. So I think cloud-based system increases data privacy.
That's a great point about email, too. People send, I'll help you, just send me your password. Oh, sure, here it is in an email, and then you just think everything's fine, so I know. Yeah. So, Stephen, since you didn't answer did you want to follow up, Stefan? You good? Stephen, since you, the last thing didn't not necessarily apply to your product, correct? So I'll ask you the next question first. This is from Oris Color, and they would like to know what protocols need to be in place if there is a data breach.
What protocols?
What protocols need to be in place if there is a data breach?
Again, I'm on the administrative side, so
okay.
It doesn't really touch the world that I'm in. It's probably more applicable to the.
Okay, well, I've got another one for you after, I promise.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Cannon. I'm just going to call you Mr. Cannon.
That's fine, sure.
Mr. Cannon, USA.
This is, this is certainly, part of the process and procedure that I talked about earlier. When we're looking at dealing with sensitive information and particularly, information such as personal health data or credit card information, part of the process needs to deal with the what ifs. So if there is a breach, what happens? How are those issues escalated? So, just to give you an example within Canon, when we look at our specific process from a HIPAA services delivery perspective through our professional services organization, we actually have a chain of escalation inside our organization when we do find that there is a process breach, and that breach can be everything from a physical security breach to a breach of electronic systems. And we actually have formed a crisis management committee within our organization that basically convenes to deal with those issues to, number one, immediately address the breach itself in an effort to stem the hemorrhaging, if you will, and then obviously the appropriate remediation to ensure that we can lock down systems and the like. to try to ensure that the damage associated with the breach of data is as minimal as possible. But again, going back to where this starts when you define and build your core delivery processes. And not only do you need to build them, you need to test them. So when we look at delivering these kinds of services that deal with managing this kind of information, again, the process is one thing. QA testing of those processes is another. That's a critical step in making sure that your processes work well, and a critical step in ensuring that if you do have a breach, you're in a position to address it very quickly.
Thank you very much, Linda. Pastor Solomar? Okay.
Okay. Protocols. So, with respect to organizations that have a lot of personal information, I'll give you an example of one that I worked with at this one insurance company. They actually had an incident notification process. They had a team, kind of to your point over there. It was put in place, documented workflow, because I went in there because they had actually made a mistake. 1,800 records were done incorrectly, and they had this incident notification process, and they said, well, here's our workflow. And we went through it, and when we looked at the cost of that mistake, it was about $300,000 before lawsuits, just to notify people that we made a mistake.
Wow.
And then they have insurance.
I would have told everyone for $200,000, just so you know.
Then they have, on top of that, they have insurance for if they make a mistake. So to cover your identities and protect all these things and your families for the next year. And so these are some of the protocols that I'm seeing in place today.
Thanks. Xerox?
I think we've probably covered it. A lot of it has to do with the planning up front is really key. You can't wait for a breach. That's probably the number one thing. You really have to think about this, and you have to think of every possibility, of problems that could occur, and then what's the resolution for each one of those. We've kind of touched on the various aspects of it, but it's that pre-planning. You can't wait until something happens and then decide, oh, what are we going to do about it? Because by then, you don't have time for that. You really have to operate really, really quickly, so you need to have these things in place.
Right. Stefan, do you want to address this one? Okay, no problem. Okay, we have questions from home. Is that true? Okay, hang on. This is Sandy Hubbard.
Okay, you've managed to freak everybody out at home. We have some multiple questions here, but I did want to give one to Avanti because I think when you've introduced yourself, you talked about data integration and the ways you protect the levels of information and so forth. And people want to know, integrating in the cloud seems like it keeps wrong versions from, like if you're backing up a version on site and then you don't know which one is which, or you're integrating with someone else and you pick the wrong version, or you overwrite the most current version. So would a tool, I don't want to be Avanti specific, but when we talk about integrating with other providers and so forth, does it seem like a cloud-based solution would address some of that?
Well, now you're moving kind of from the world of security into the world of disaster recovery and business continuity. That's the hot topic for folks in that context. If something did go wrong, what's their ability to get back to a steady state? Or what are their recovery time objectives? What are the recovery point objectives that they need to get to? I actually think where Paul was saying, oh, the on-premise is much more secure and we should all do that. Frankly, I don't really care if they do it on-premise or in the cloud. It's a complete decision for them to do that. Because I offer both, I really don't care. But I have to tell you that when they are given the option of on-premise or on-cloud, I think there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt that drives the decision. There's that fear. What's the public relations issue attached to something like that happening? And 90% of them, even though I offer it in the cloud, 90% of my customers will put it on premise, just from that fear, uncertainty, and doubt side of things. As it applies to being able to get different applications and different pieces of equipment to work together, it really isn't an issue of on-premise or on cloud. It used to be 2 or 3 years ago, all the applications had to be in the same location for them to be able to communicate, because my SQL database is different than Xerox's database, which is different than someone else's, so they all needed to be in the same area. But the vendors are all getting better at being able to manage systems and applications that are running in different locations, different data centers, and they need to be, as a vendor, you need to be able to manage both the application and the data that's on site, as well as things that are in multiple data centers throughout the world.
Thank you. Did you want to address that, Stefan? Yep. Okay, and then I'll move on to our last question for the whole panel, if that's okay, because I just want to make sure we have enough time.
Okay. I think this question about different versions, it comes from when you get how do you get the data into the system? If you have different emails, phone calls, and things like that, how do you know which one is the most recent? If you let the customer enters the data into the system, and the administrator have same look as the customer, and everything is saved, a history, a transaction log for which one have made the change, when is the change made, and what was the change, and that should be logged, and to be able to know which version is the most the one to use.
We have an expression in America, garbage in, garbage out. So if it's not right going in, it's not going to be right coming out.
Yeah.
This question is actually from Marco Morales, who's working in the booth somewhere here. And he wanted to know, what future data and privacy trends should we all be gearing up for? And I'm hoping the whole panel can answer this, and also let people know how they can get in touch with you as you wrap up your answer, and then we'll wrap up the panel. We'll start with Xerox, if you don't mind.
Well, again, I think a lot of the security that we're seeing today is pretty standard. All the HTTPS, the standard encryptions. What you're going to see in the future is even more uniform use across everything. We still see a lot of systems that are not yet using all the standards that are out there. The standards will continue to get better, but then all of the systems will absolutely be utilizing them, versus today we walk in, and even though they could be using encryption and that, they just haven't quite gotten around to using it. They haven't enabled some of the existing standards that are there. I think you'll find that that's just not going to be acceptable in the future. Everybody will be doing that, especially as you're moving out into the cloud-based environments, that it will just be automated and automatic. When you buy these services, it's just going to be enabled. There's not going to be even an option to turn some of these things off and use a less secure system. That will be pretty standard. So again, contacting me, I'm over at the Xerox booth, but eric.thibodeau@xerox.com.
Thank you so much for joining us. Paul? Thanks,
Deborah. I think you handled that just right. I think that's one of the trends we're seeing. I think there's certainly a sense of paranoia now in the market. The standard operating procedures, the documenting of them, all of these things are absolutely critical and under audit fire. If you're in a business that is compliance heavy or really looked at. I think from a trends perspective, we're starting to see, we just introduced something that you can see in our booth number 641. It's a redaction tool. And redaction meaning, as we create something using data, let's say it was to be printed and mailed, it would have the critical information on it, but let's say there was a particular number, credit card number, your, any personal information on there, it would be redacted, absolutely removed whether it was hash marks and X's, and you'll see your last 4 digits if you get an invoice coming off a machine that you use your credit card. But we're doing that in the documents. And what's really important about this too is we want it to be a persistent security, meaning after it's printed and it's sent, we're going to redact it and keep it redacted in storage so that if somebody was to do it, because if you think about breaches, most of the time it's an internal thing, although the hackers are out there doing things. We're going to keep it in a redacted state in your own storage system so that even if somebody sent it out, there would be no valuable information there. So it's one of the trends we're seeing.
And how can people get in touch, Paul, besides where your booth is?
They can come to our website at solomarsystems.com or hit me up at paul.abdul@solomarsystems.com.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Linda, and thanks for joining us.
Good. Thank you. So right now, all this data privacy and data integrity we talked about for things like regulated industries, healthcare, insurance, etc., will probably expand to more industries. Right now, those are just the hot buttons because there were problems. So mail piece integrity, data integrity will become more important across more verticals and more industries, even in direct mail. Right, so communications that are meant for one client with specific offers that aren't meant for another client. So we think it's all going to expand on the requirement. The other thing in mailing, there are some clients, you mentioned a client you visited. I visited an insurance company recently, and on their premium renewals, they didn't have any integrity on the paper. No optical mark, no barcode, no 2D barcode. And they said, well, they're all one-pagers, so it's fine. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when something will get mixed. And so even if it doesn't contain confidential healthcare information, it's still client information. So it's just going to keep expanding on the requirements across more industries.
Thanks so much.
Add to this, one of the things you talked about, the offers. The offers, one bank I went to, they actually sent out an offer to open up an account. They would put $100 in it to start, which was a mistake because they sent it, they picked a certain data set to send it to. They had to honor that offer afterwards because they sent it to everybody instead of to the specific people.
So that's where my $100 went. Thanks. And Linda, how can people get in touch with Pitney?
So we're at booth 1239 and via social media at Pitney Bowes. Certainly our website, pb.com, and I'm Linda with an I, .kish, Kish, at pb.com.
And I just want to mention one thing. Pitney Bowes has an awesome print chat once a month, every Thursday, the last Thursday of the month. Is that correct, Marifer? The second Thursday of the month. It's called The Power of Precision Chat. It starts at 8 o'clock at night, Eastern Time. And if you're on Twitter, then you really should check it out. It's one of the most amazing experiences you'll have. There's always business leaders there. It's a very knowledgeable chat that's is really helpful to everybody. Ken?
Yeah, I think there are a couple kind of macro, changes that are happening in terms of data and privacy in the marketplace. I mean, certainly the good news is that the technology that's being offered to print service providers is getting better in terms of dealing with some of these issues. But if we look at some of the key trends that we're seeing in the marketplace, of course, the first is that customer expectations in this area are increasing, and they're increasing rapidly. So, and in many cases, those expectations are becoming a decision-making criteria for customers who are looking to work with a print service provider. So keep that in mind. It's not just about the technology you're using. Again, it's about the processes, the physical security in your plants. And in many cases, as a print service provider, you're going to be evaluated on this as part of the process of making or being down selected to provide services to customers. So that's one key trend we're seeing. Another is that the regulatory environment here is becoming more challenging. And we've already talked about some of the regulated industries like the financial services industry as well as healthcare, but clearly some of the things we're seeing even outside of highly regulated industries would lead us to believe that the environment is going to become more critical. And as that happens, it means that the margin for error as a print service provider becomes less. So if you haven't started to take the steps to figure out how to deal with security in terms of your internal operations and the services you're providing, now's a good time to start, because certainly it's not going to be as forgiving as maybe it is today, even for industries outside of the likes of healthcare and financial services.
Thanks so much. And the website? Canon?
Sure. The website is www.usa.canon.com, and if you did need to reach me directly, it's damorosano@cusa.canon.com.
And your Twitter account is Canon USA Biz.
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay. Stephen?
I think the key trend in the pool that Stefan and I swim in terms of software to help run the print shops, whether it's an in-plant or a print service provider, will be that trend towards the cloud. That people become more and more comfortable with it. They will become what it means to them. The implication for them, though, is that they need to have some expertise on staff to be able to deal with that, or have some bench strength virtually on people that they can go and count on to help provide them getting ready for the cloud. That fear, uncertainty, and doubt that I talked about, I think will diminish over time. I'll still have, I've got my government accounts and my financial services accounts. They're constantly throwing us through the hoop of, you must pass our penetration testing that goes on. And so there's a lot of onus on us as vendors to make sure that we get there. But I think there's also a role for us to play as evangelists to help people realize that there is more to do with the fear, uncertainty, and doubt attached to, again, as I said, that public relations fiasco, if anything ever actually did happen. But there will be more and more move to the cloud.
And your website?
You can reach us at avantisystems.com. It's also our social media driver. We also have one for pound Ask Avanti.
Perfect. Thank you so much for participating. Stefan?
Okay, the key trend I see is that the printers need to go online. Printing might be the last business to do that accurately. We have you can take a mortgage of your house online, but you cannot order print. And why is that? It's print estimating is difficult, they say, but now we have the tools to put the printing order online, and not just some standard products, but all your products that you can produce. If you can produce it, we can estimate it automatically. If you want to test this, come visit our booth, 3864. It's the nearest booth here, or you can visit our website, arific.com.
And your Twitter account is Arific Official.
Yeah.
I know because I tweet it all the time. I want to thank you all so much for spending your time with us. This is a very topical topic. I encourage everybody at home to visit these companies' websites, to talk to them if you're going to implement any sort of system that requires data security. Obviously, speak to the experts first, is following the advice of Xerox. Don't let your nephew take care of it. And thank you, everybody, very much again. Thanks, everybody.